My boss installed a timer on my desk. Not for productivity, not for meetings. She used it to track exactly how long I spent in the bathroom. And if I went over 4 minutes, she'd send me a formal written warning. This is the story of how I survived working for the most obsessive micromanager you've ever heard of. Before I dive into this nightmare, if you love workplace drama and stories about terrible bosses, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. And drop a comment below telling me, have you ever had a boss who tracked your every move? Now, let me tell you what happened. I was 26 years old when I landed what I thought was my dream job, marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. The salary was decent, the benefits were solid, and during my interview, the office seemed vibrant and welcoming. People were laughing in the break room, the walls were decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and innovation. I remember thinking to myself, this is it. This is where I'm going to build my career. I had no idea what was waiting for me on the 3rd floor. My first day started off normal enough. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my best blazer, carrying a notebook I'd bought specifically to look professional. The HR representative walked me through orientation, handed me my laptop, and then escorted upstairs to meet my direct supervisor. Her name was Diane Morrison. She was a thin woman in her mid-50s with sharp cheekbones and reading glasses that she wore on a beaded chain around her neck. Her silver hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, almost too firm, and she looked me up and down like she was already calculating my worth. "I run a tight ship," she said, her voice clipped and precise. "I expect punctuality, professionalism, and productivity. If you can deliver those 3 things, we'll get along just fine." I nodded eagerly, desperate to make a good impression. "Absolutely," I said. "I'm a hard worker. You won't be disappointed." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We'll see." The first week was mostly training, learning the software, understanding the company's brand guidelines, sitting in on meetings. But I started noticing things almost immediately. Little things that made my stomach tighten. Diane would walk past my desk at random intervals, pausing just long enough to glance at my screen. She never said anything, just looked, nodded slightly, and moved on. At first, I told myself she was just being thorough, a hands-on manager. Nothing wrong with that, right? Then came the status updates. Every single hour, on the hour, Diane expected a detailed email from every member of our 5-person team. Not just a quick "everything's fine." She wanted specifics. What tasks had we completed in the last 60 minutes? What were we working on currently? What did we anticipate accomplishing in the next hour? And if the email was even 2 minutes late, she would appear at your desk like a ghost, arms crossed, asking why you hadn't reported in. I thought it was excessive, but I went along with it. I was new. I didn't want to rock the boat. My coworker, Marcus, had been there for 3 years. During our lunch break one day, I asked him if this was normal. He just laughed bitterly and shook his head. "Normal?" he said, keeping his voice low. "There's nothing normal about Diane. Just wait, you haven't seen anything yet." He was right. 3 weeks into the job, Diane called me into her office. My heart was pounding as I walked in, convinced I'd done something wrong, but she just gestured for me to sit down and slid a small digital timer across her desk toward me. It was bright red with large black numbers. "What's this?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Your accountability device," she said matter-of-factly. "From now on, whenever you leave your desk for any reason, bathroom, water, stretching your legs, you'll start this timer before you go and stop it when you return." She must have seen the shock on my face because she added, "It's not personal. I do this with everyone. Time theft is a serious issue in corporate America, and I refuse to let it happen on my watch." I sat there stunned. Time theft for using the bathroom? I don't understand, I stammered. "You want me to time my bathroom breaks?" "Among other things," she replied, completely unfazed. 4 minutes is the standard for a bathroom visit. Anything beyond that requires an explanation. If you're getting water or using the printer, 2 minutes should suffice. She adjusted her glasses and looked at me expectantly. "Is that going to be a problem?" What could I say? I needed this job. I had student loans, rent, a car payment. I took the timer. "No," I said quietly. "No problem." And just like that, my dignity started its slow erosion. For the next several months, I lived under Diane's microscopic scrutiny. Every morning, I would clock in at exactly 8:59, not a minute earlier or later, because Diane believed arriving too early was suspicious and arriving late was unacceptable. I would sit at my desk, start working immediately, and send my first status update by 9:15, then another at 10, then 11, then noon. Lunch breaks were timed down to the second. We got exactly 30 minutes, and Diane would stand in the break room doorway at the 28-minute mark, watching us finish our food. If you weren't back at your desk by the 30-minute mark, she'd note it in her little black notebook. That notebook haunted my dreams. But the bathroom timer was the worst part. I became so anxious about being timed that I started limiting my water intake at work. I would get headaches from dehydration because I was terrified of needing to use the restroom more than twice a day. And when I did go, I would literally run, rushing through everything while watching those red numbers climb higher and higher. One day, I made the mistake of taking 5 minutes and 32 seconds. I had gotten my period unexpectedly and needed a moment to take care of things. When I returned to my desk, the timer glaring at me accusingly, Diane was already there. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't care about the reason. She simply said, "That's 1 minute and 32 seconds over the limit. This will be documented." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was a human being, not a machine, that some things couldn't be controlled down to the second. But I just nodded and said, "It won't happen again." The documentation she mentioned, it went into my personnel file. 3 incidents of excessive break time, and you'd be placed on a formal performance improvement plan. 5 incidents, and you'd be terminated. It was like living in a prison disguised as an office. The constant surveillance started affecting my mental health in ways I hadn't anticipated. I would lie awake at night running through my status updates in my head, wondering if I'd been detailed enough. I started having anxiety attacks in my car before work, gripping the steering wheel and trying to breathe through the panic. My boyfriend at the time noticed that I was different, quieter, more withdrawn. "Just quit," he would say. "No job is worth this." But in my mind, quitting meant failure. It meant letting Diane win. There was one moment that almost broke me completely. It was a Thursday afternoon, about 6 months into my employment. I was working on a presentation that was due the following Monday, and I was in the zone, really focused, making good progress. I must have gotten so absorbed in my work that I forgot to send my 3 o'clock status update. At 3:04, Diane appeared at my desk like a specter. "You're late," she said simply. I felt my blood run cold. "I'm so sorry," I said, already opening my email. I was focused on the Henderson presentation and lost track of. "I don't accept excuses," she cut me off. "This is your second offense this month. 1 more and you'll be placed on a PIP. She turned and walked away without another word. I sat there, trembling, fighting back tears. I had been doing my actual job, the job I was hired to do, and I was being threatened with disciplinary action because I was 4 minutes late sending an email that served no purpose other than to satisfy Diane's pathological need for control. That night, I went home and cried for 2 hours straight. My boyfriend held me while I sobbed about bathroom timers and status updates and feeling like I was losing my mind. And somewhere in the middle of all those tears, something shifted inside me. I realized that Diane wasn't just a difficult boss. She was systematically stripping away my sense of self, my confidence, my autonomy. And I was letting her. I started documenting everything, every unreasonable demand, every timed bathroom break, every threatening comment. I saved emails, took screenshots, wrote detailed notes with dates and times. I researched workplace harassment and hostile work environments. I learned about my rights as an employee. And I discovered that 3 other people had quit Diane's team in the past 2 years, all citing the same issues I was experiencing. It took me another month to gather the courage to go to HR. I walked into that office with a folder full of evidence and a shaking voice, convinced they would dismiss me as overly sensitive. But the HR manager, a kind woman named Patricia, listened to everything I had to say. She looked through my documentation, her expression growing more and more troubled. "This is extensive," she said finally. "We've received complaints about Diane before, but nothing this detailed." An investigation was launched. They interviewed every member of our team, past and present. They reviewed emails, policies, and procedures. And what they found was even worse than I expected. Diane had been falsifying productivity reports to make it look like her surveillance tactics were improving performance. In reality, her team had the highest turnover rate and lowest morale scores in the entire company. 3 employees had filed complaints with HR over the years, but they had either been dismissed or swept under the rug because Diane had a friendly relationship with the previous HR director. But not this time. 6 weeks after I filed my complaint, Diane Morrison was terminated. I wasn't there when it happened, but Marcus told me she was escorted out by security, her face white with shock. Apparently, she kept saying, "This is a mistake. I was just trying to run an efficient team." Efficient. That's what she called making grown adults time their bathroom breaks. The aftermath was like emerging from a fog. Our new supervisor, a man named Derek, was the complete opposite of Diane. He trusted us to manage our own time. He asked for weekly updates instead of hourly ones. He never once commented on how long anyone spent away from their desk. It took me months to stop feeling anxious every time I got up for water. I would catch myself glancing at my phone, calculating how many minutes had passed, before remembering that I didn't have to do that anymore. The experience taught me something valuable, though painful. Your workplace should never make you feel like a prisoner. Your boss should never make you feel less than human. And if you find yourself in a situation like I was, document everything. Speak up. Find allies. Because you deserve to work in an environment where you're treated with basic dignity and respect. That's not asking for too much. That's asking for the bare minimum. Looking back now, 2 years removed from that nightmare, I'm grateful for the experience in a strange way. It taught me to recognize red flags, to advocate for myself, and to never accept abuse just because I need a paycheck. And somewhere out there, Diana's probably timing someone else's bathroom breaks, but it's not me anymore, and it never will be again.